people didn't realize it. Well, he finally decides he's going to get the hell out of California, and he hobbles back over to the river and tries to set up a boating business again. But while he was in town, he had met this girl. An old 36-foot barge had been abandoned at the camp by the Edison Power Company after the government had turned down their applications to build a low dam at the bottom of Boulder Canyon. The hull was still tight, so I made it my headquarters. Building a little 8x10 shack on one end of it, she hung over a foot on either side, was slow work because I could only lift a few pounds at a time. Anything heavy I had to drag into place by crawling on my hands and knees. But it was finally done, and I floated the barge 10 miles down to Hemingway Wash. One of my friends had the pleasure of bringing my Model T the 80-odd miles through the sand and over the mountains to meet me. Because of the politics of the thing, I was betting the dam would be built at Black Canyon, and Hemingway Wash was the closest you could come to it by road. Business started off with a bang. Fred Hess put an ad in the Vegas paper announcing that I was in business and ready to take anyone on a round trip down through the dam sites and back for $2.50. Quite a few people came. I'll bet I had 30 customers that first month, and that set me up. I don't know whether they came to see the dam sites or the dumb hobbling knothead who ran the boat, but they came. After that first rush of business, things slacked off a bit. Remember, the August was a little on the rough side. I had exactly one fare. But I wasn't too bad off. I had my little rag shack on the barge to keep me out of the weather. There were a few shells from my old Winchester rifle, so I could always get a jackrabbit for the pot. And of course, living right on the river, I always had a line in the water for bullheads. About this time, I'm trading letters with my little doll in the city. I took to driving down to visit her every once in a while in the little Model T coupe. I'd leave my lonesome little boat landing late in the afternoon so as not to miss any possible customers, drive like hell down the dirt road to Barstow where I'd pick up the blacktop leading into LA. If I escaped getting stuck in the sand and had no more than the average 3 flat tires on the way, I'd be waiting outside her office the following afternoon when she got off work. Well, for many months I commuted between the boat landing and my doll in the city. In my weakened condition, these trips were gradually killing me off. I realized I had to do something fast. So on my 11th trip, as we were driving around, I was surprised to hear myself ask her to marry me. She accepted speedily enough, but right away she said she wouldn't live in Nevada. I stopped the car, opened the door, and said, "All right, it's over, get out. I'm going back to Nevada." She got the point real quick, like. Changed her mind, and we settled on a wedding date right then and there. We were married in Los Angeles a few weeks later on July 2nd, 1928. After ditching the wedding party and spending the night in the old Roslyn Hotel, we started across the desert for Las Vegas. But those 300 miles were too much for a pair of newlyweds to make in one day, so we spent our second night sleeping out under the yucca trees on top of Yucca Summit. Next night in Las Vegas, wise guy Rod Colton took us for a ride in his big Dodge touring car. And where does he take us? But down to Block 16, the biggest red light district in all of Nevada. All the joy girls, or sporting ladies as they call themselves, were sitting out on the sidewalk waiting for business, and Rod drove real slow, so they couldn't help but see me. Every last one of them waved and called me by name. My bride wanted an explanation fast. Well, naturally, I had no idea this was where they worked. I don't know nothing in my boat business. They like to go boat riding, and they always had plenty of money to buy tickets. And certainly it was a shock to me, under my 2-year-old bride, to find them down here. Just goes to prove you couldn't trust people who claim to be your friends. Well, here's Murl and his new bride, lovely Edith, and she was a saint of a woman. They lived happily ever after, actually. See, there's something wrong with him here. It's just like half his hip is gone. But this is at Hemingway Wash, which is where Boulder Beach is now, right? That first beach above the dam. And this is where he set up shop. Business that summer was just about nothing. It was too hot for the dudes, so all we had was an occasional congressman, senator, or engineer. All this while, Senator Johnson and Congressman Swing of Los Angeles were working hard to sell the nation on building the dam. Their swing Johnson bill finally did the trick in the fall of '28, and not a moment too soon, because even hauling all the big shots and engineers through the dam sites, we couldn't make enough money to eat very regularly. Luckily for us, the catfish were biting that summer, and some of the watermelon vines a prospector friend of mine had planted in the spring had a good crop. But it was a pretty tough summer for my bride, living off fried catfish and watermelon down on that hot, muddy river. In the fall, things got better fast. We moved down to Hemingway Wash again to cash in on the rash of sightseers the cool fall weather brought. And with the dam a sure thing, there were more of them than ever. I had 25-foot tunnel stern Kermit-powered launch I'd gotten from the Hess party and nearly filled it with $2.50 dudes on some of those trips. Had to get a second boat, then a third boat, then a fourth. My brother Horace, who had just turned 15, came down from Los Angeles to help out. To expand our operation and build ourselves a house on dry land, we went up to the Hess camp with the truck and tore down a bunch of old shacks for lumber. Looked like an easy job until Horace turned the truck over with our partly fabricated house on board and ended up building it out of splinters and wreckage. But what the hell, a roof, 4 walls were all we needed, because even in the fall it's still pretty hot. I remember well that I took the proceeds of 3 months of hauling dudes to scrape together the money to put the tar paper on our roof. We didn't quite get in time for the first rain, but hell, she was out and tight by the time our son Pat was born, 9 months and 15 minutes after we were married. And by that time, we had it made. We were finally on our way. It's the business. More and more people were coming in all the time. All of the men out of work hoping for a new job on the dam, and gradually a little rag town grew up around our headquarters. Pretty soon our camp was a madhouse. We closed down the boarding house. Nell, his wife's name's Edith, but he never calls her Edith, he calls her Nell. I'd been running for 20 government engineers and converted it into a store. It was only 16 by 24 feet, and that was just about big enough to dump a truckload of food in the back door and shove it out the front to the customers. Dad ran our biggest boat, and Nell ran the store. Since we had 5 employees clerking and truck driving for the store, and 9 more on the boats, we had to turn our house into a private boarding house for the help, which meant we had to move outdoors into a couple of tents. The whole canyon was lighted up bright as day with big floodlights that made it possible for the job to continue full steam through the night. The bulk of my job was transporting workers from the ends of the road where the buses stopped to the 4 diversion tunnels. But I also handled the barges that ferried equipment. Everything was a big rush deal. 3 of my boats were over 30 feet long and carried from 30 to 60 men. That wasn't legal capacity, of course. We had no life jackets. Men just kept jumping in until the water started coming in over the side, and then we'd toss a couple off and start out. We'd make the shift crossings from one side of the river to the other in a matter of 15 to 20 minutes. Poor people came by the hundreds to work on the dam. Many of them came on foot, and there was no place for them to eat or sleep. Many of them had nothing at all. They'd camp, whole families of them, underneath a mesquite tree, which they cover up with a couple blankets or tarps. We just couldn't sit there and watch them starve. We had to feed them. With our boats and crew and our store full of groceries, we represented all the money in the world to these poor people. And I had 1 truck running every day to Las Vegas for groceries. I remember one day the load cost $1,700. We were so busy at the store we didn't even have time to count the money. We just kept a wash tub underneath the counter and threw the money in, dipping in to make change, and after you paid your bills, what was left in the tub was pretty much yours. It was simple bookkeeping. But they had good business. But it was more business than we could handle by any means. At the same time, that truck would go to town at night and haul the dead or dying to the hospital or the morgue. The company had no ambulance at the start of the job or even a first aid station, but they did everything they could avoid to have men die officially on the job. They'd load dead men in my truck pretending they were alive to get them classified at the hospital as DOA. Dying on the job complicated matters and called attention to the dangerous working conditions and the lack of safety precautions. That first summer, we had terrific heat prostration problems. I've had men sitting next to me in the boat, keel over dead from the heat, right on top of the motor. It was a wild, wild rush in those early days. Things were hectic, 24 hours a day, but it didn't last long. The hectic part was over in just about a year, and that was long enough because it was just too rough. There'll never be another job like it, not in this country. We never got paid for most of the food we gave out on credit during the strike. Of course, under those conditions, you couldn't really expect to. One night, just before we left, we had a big bonfire and burned up all the unpaid credit tickets. I don't know how many thousands of dollars were there, but there was nothing else we could do. As time passed, the company got organized and really started looking after their men. They finally got an ambulance, threw up a hospital, and built the town of Boulder City. And gradually the people moved up to town, and pretty soon our camp was deserted. By that time the bridges were built, and there were little walkways across the canyon, so they didn't need our boats anymore. The railroad was in, the preliminary work on the dam was over, and for us, the job was over, and we were glad to see it end. We were all shut down and moved out by '33.